Welcome to Ladies Talking Love, Season 3, Episode 18, Functioning at Your Peak. It's Ladies Talking Love, a community of women uncovering more joy and fulfillment in sex as we learn from experts and amazing women like you. Together, let's create a world where women's sexuality is celebrated and understood, beginning with our own. I'm your host, Ariel Finlinson. Let's talk love. Growing up, I just assumed that after having a baby, there would be some things that happened to my body that would never be the same. And while I think that is true to an extent, some of the things I believed don't have to be true. For instance, like every time I jump, I will pee now, or have to run to the bathroom because I can't hold in my pee. Those things are actually myths, but we've come to a place in our society where we often accept those as facts, but they don't need to be. I'm so excited to have a pelvic floor therapist on today to talk more about some of the common myths that we believe are normal that actually may not be. BreeAnn Allred is the founder and owner of Luna Physio and has been a pelvic health physical therapist for 17 years. She received her doctorate in physical therapy from the University of Utah in 2007. She's been married for 20 years and is the mother to 4 incredible kids. In her work, she empowers women throughout the life cycle and challenges the status quo of what we have accepted as normal. She wants everyone to live the best life possible. But before jumping in, I just wanted to let you know about my free masterclass from touched out to turned on. I'll be doing 3 live masterclasses from February 6th to February 13th, so it's just in time for Valentine's Day. And if you show up live, I will be giving away a fun, simple game that you can try out on Valentine's Day, because sometimes we need a little something to push us into the discomfort, as was talked about in a recent podcast episode, that leaning into discomfort can actually be a catalyst to more connection and more desire in your relationship. So I'm going to give everyone who shows up live a game that they can play on Valentine's Day that is so simple, and all you need is a set of face cards, and then I'll tell you what else you can do with that. So make sure and save your seat. From touched out to turned on, we are going to dive into 4 myths that make it almost impossible to access desire. And by the end of the 1-hour workshop, you are going to go away feeling empowered with the tools you need to start creating the sex life that you deserve. I'll also be doing a live Q&A at the end, so make sure and save your seat and come live. There's a link in the show notes, or you can just go to ladiestalkinglove.com/masterclass. I'm so excited to see you there. But without further ado, let's talk love. I'm so excited to welcome BreeAnn Allred onto Ladies Talking Love today. Thanks so much for joining me, BreeAnn.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's just jump in a little bit. You're a pelvic floor physical therapist. Can you tell us a little bit about what led you to get into this field?
Oh, absolutely. So physical therapy in general, I have always had a fascination for the body, like science, anatomy, physiology. They were like my favorite classes in high school, when everybody I feel like is really delving into what am I going to do with my life afterwards. My one hang up, I was trying to find a way that I could be in the medical field so that I could have this interest really kind of feed into a career. But I did not do well with blood. Like I would almost pass out. And this was little amounts of blood. So I was like, how am I going to do medicine without being able to tolerate blood? Because I'm like, it's just part of the medical field. And then I had a work release my senior year of high school. And I worked as a lifeguard at our local pool and taught swim lessons. And the elementary school kids, for part of their PE class, would come down and get swim lessons at the pool. I scheduled the kiddos with disabilities during the time that I was going to be there for my work release. So these kiddos could get in the pool with their classmates, but still have the one-on-one care that they needed to be able to be safe with that. And their physical therapist came and showed me what to do with them. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I can do. That's so body, medical.
No blood.
No blood. I mean, if there's blood, it's like from a scar.
Yeah.
Or from an incision. That's usually pretty minor and it works great. I've since now, I've watched surgeries and do really good. And I'm like, okay, I could probably have done this now, but it was just kind of at that time how things worked. So that got me into physical therapy. For pelvic floor, my first job, I was in a rural clinic and I saw whatever walked in the door. I started getting pregnant patients with back pain. And I was like, I need to know more what to do with them and how this pelvic floor plays in and hormones and the female body. And it really kind of started piquing my interest. And my second job, I was the only female therapist. So I started getting more and more referrals for these pregnant patients with back pain and pelvic pain. And that's where it kind of started for me. And then I would see these same patients postpartum. And it was like, okay, I have to delve into this. And the more I delved into it, the more I'm like, this is such an underserved population. Why are we not talking about this more? Why are we not educating women about their own bodies? One of the biggest changes that they'll ever go through in their life, which is pregnancy. There are so many changes, pregnancy and postpartum hormonally, that it's just an incredible feat. I mean, we grow a human, for heaven's sakes. It's just incredible. And we're not talking about what happens in this phenomenal feat in a woman's body. I really, really delved in. I just found a passion for this area. Then I had my own babies and became even more passionate about it with the knowledge that I had, even the dysfunction that I myself as a woman in this pregnancy postpartum phase, the struggles that I was having and not being able to do the things that I wanted to do and not being able to live the life that I wanted to live with these little people that I had worked so hard to bring into this world. It really just kind of brought me full circle back to, it's like, this is what I do. I'm specialized. I only do pelvic health primarily. I'm like, pelvic health, the pelvic floor is a part of a system, part of the body, and it's affected by what's going on in your knees and your ankles and your hips and further up in your spine and your breathing and different things that way. So I do treat the whole body, but it's usually with a pelvic floor emphasis or a specialist emphasis that way.
Oh, I love this so much because, it's crazy how little we as women know about our own bodies and the functions. And there's so many things that we think are normal that actually aren't. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the common myths that we have about our pelvic floor health as women?
I would say the most common one that everybody thinks about is peeing your pants after having a baby. And that's completely normal. My mom used to tell me like, oh, I can't jump on the trampoline anymore since having you guys. She just completely eliminated that from her life. Just realizing our bodies, just as I was talking earlier, have undergone such a phenomenal feat with pregnancy, the body changes, the hormone changes, and then postpartum, those same kind of opposite hormone changes as our hormones drop and we move into this kind of postpartum phase, that our muscles and our body are not the same. And yet we expect it to be able to get back to normal without doing anything on that. Think of an athlete where maybe things are a little bit more advanced in this field, I guess you could say. These athletes, if they have a knee surgery, if they have a hip surgery, a shoulder surgery, they are getting seen by a PT before they go home from the hospital, whether that's like you've just come out of the anesthesia and are coherent and they're starting to tell you some things to do. And most of the time you're having a consult with them within your first few days post-op. Why are we not doing this with other things? Why are we not doing this with abdominal surgeries? Why are we not doing this after C-section? It's a major abdominal surgery. They cut through 7 layers of tissue when you have a C-section.
Wow. Yeah.
Why are we not doing this after childbirth? Because these muscles are going through those same types of procedures. For some women, they're actually getting torn during childbirth, and we're expecting them just to heal and recover on their own. It doesn't happen oftentimes without some focus. And a lot of women are left with dysfunction and symptoms that we just think are normal. Common things we've accepted as normal is painful intercourse. Sex should not be painful. It should actually be pleasurable. And so that's a common myth. So if you're having those symptoms, you need to be reaching out to see what is going on. Having lack of bladder or bowel control, or sometimes it can be the opposite, not being able to empty your bladder well, or not being able to have regular bowel movements. That can be another sign or symptom there. Honestly, we shouldn't be having pain on a regular basis in our bodies either. So that could be another kind of myth that it's like, oh, I've just had a baby or my abs are never going to be the same. Well, if you rehab them, they can. And maybe they're not going to be the same. I will say, I'm like, you can't stretch a hair elastic to Timbuktu and back and expect it to come back to its original shape and size. And so depending on how we carry our children, if we have multiples, some people carry further out, some people are, do you know what I mean, hardly show because they've got a longer torso. So those can all be a factor. But oftentimes our body won't be as they were before, but your function and your lifestyle should be able to return to what you desire. Those activities that you were doing before. If you didn't have urine leakage before pregnancy, you shouldn't be having urine leakage afterwards. If you are, it is dysfunctional and it needs to be addressed.
That is so helpful. And I think it's so common. I used to teach a workout class, and whenever we would do like the jumping parts, there'd be several women were like, and it's just normal. It's like, oh, well, I pee when I jump now, or I pee when I'm like exercising hard.
We're only wearing black pants because they don't show when there's pee all over them.
Yes. And same for me, like all growing up. My mom had these struggles, but it was just like, well, she had kids. I guess this is how it is. And so I'm so grateful for being able to try to get the word out. This isn't normal, and there are things we can do to help. And I loved how you talked about your body won't be the same. I mean, you just created a human, but we can find a new normal where that function can get back to how you want to be able to function. And that's a huge thing I talk about. Our bodies change as we age, as we have kids, and we don't need them to be the same, but let's take care of them and be able to work on living the lifestyle that we want and that we love. So what are some common pelvic floor struggles? You mentioned some of them, but outside of pregnancy, along with like peeing your pants or having trouble not being able to pee or painful intercourse, are there other common pelvic floor struggles that women face that you're like, okay, we should know this isn't normal?
I'm just going to take it through the lifespan a little bit. This is one of the things that I like to tell people is that we're trying to empower you throughout your lifespan.
Perfect.
Let's kind of talk about teenage girls, kind of in that area where we come into early womanhood a little bit. We start having menstruation, pain with periods. There is a little bit of some norm there, but if you're having periods to the extent where you're having to miss school or not able to go to work, or you're throwing up because the pain is so bad, that is not normal. Some cramping, you take a little bit of ibuprofen and you're able to function, that could be considered some normal responses with menstruation. But if you're having severe pelvic pain, it is not normal. In a younger generation, constipation, having lots of difficulties with hemorrhoids, with bowel movements, things along those lines, those can also be a problem. And there are some young girls that have recurrent UTIs. Pelvic floor can be a common kind of factor in that. Or problems with bowel control or leakage in that phase of life are not normal as well. Now we move into the young adult to adult females, and we would be looking at a lot of, I would say often in this time frame is related to pregnancy and the postpartum time frame. So in pregnancy, any type of pain that's preventing you from functioning is not normal. So further in the pregnancy, kind of postpartum, during pregnancy, any sort of back pain, pelvic pain, pubic bone pain, things along those lines, those are treatable. They're not normal. Some discomfort because you're growing a human inside your body and things are changing a little bit. Yeah, that's to be expected, but it shouldn't be to the point where you're having to drastically change your lifestyle because of it. Postpartum, we can look at, okay, one of the common ones is urine leakage. Painful intercourse is not normal. It's not normal ever. And I will say, one of my favorite sayings is common doesn't mean normal. Now, can it be common to have painful intercourse after delivery? Yes. And that's related to some of these hormone changes. Breastfeeding also can affect things as well. Scar tissue, if you had any tears, even just these muscles have been stretched if you deliver that baby vaginally, or even just from carrying a child, all of that weight on the pelvic floor can injure it just a little bit. Those can be some factors that could contribute to some painful intercourse afterwards. And there's so many things that you can do to ensure that you have a positive experience there, and making sure your scar tissue is healing well and that it's not restricted and causing pain. Looking to see like, how are your vaginal tissues doing? And do they seem like that they have enough adequate estrogen and hormone responses? There's things we can do to help normalize that so that it's not painful. We can have bowel control issues. We can have persistent pelvic pain or back pain. We can deal a lot with breastfeeding postures, upper back pain from having to care for your baby, neck pain. There's a mommy thumb that we can help with just based on how you're using your wrists for picking up a baby as well. And there's things we can actually do for mastitis
Mm.
too, or if you're getting clogged milk ducts. So those are kind of some new areas.
Oh, awesome.
There's things we can do for all of these things.
Yeah, I didn't know you could help with that.
Then if we move into kind of the later stages of life with menopause, we have another big hormone shift and another big body change. One of the things that's common there, we get a lot of times like overactive bladder type of symptoms where all of a sudden you're feeling like you have to pee all the time. I know there's tons of commercials or different jokes where it's like, oh, grandma knows where every bathroom is in the valley because they're having to so frequently. Or it can be another common one here is something called pelvic organ prolapse. And this is where our pelvic organs, which are our bladder, our uterus, and our bowel, may be having some support issues. So they're starting to hang or to drop a little bit in the pelvis into the vagina. And oftentimes people will say, I feel like I have something falling out of my vagina. That's kind of a common time for that. That can be an issue in younger women as well, but this is just another kind of common time that we'll see that. Bowel control issues, gas control, that is actually something, it's kind of a minor form of fecal incontinence. So those are kind of some symptoms where it's like, okay, we think of these as common, like I'm just getting older, so now I can't control when I pass gas. No, that's dysfunctional. And if these muscles are functioning well, we don't have to accept that as our life.
That is so helpful. I'm so glad you're talking about this because I wish that this was more common knowledge, which is why we're having you on the podcast. But there are just so many struggles that we don't realize we can get help with. I'm so grateful that we're starting to talk about it and figuring out like, oh, this isn't normal. There's stuff we can do to help this. So how can pelvic floor help some of these struggles? What are some of the things you might do if someone comes into your office to help some of these struggles? I guess I should say clinic. It's not an into your clinic.
I think either way, right? It works. We really consider ourselves bone, muscle, and nerve specialists. We have a lot of knowledge on the muscular system, I would say, even as our bread and butter. That is our area of focus, is the muscular system. But what else feeds into that is definitely the nervous system. So we get a lot there, and the muscles control the bones. So that's kind of our areas of expertise. A lot of our main modalities are going to be exercise related, and we do some things for what we call manual therapy, which is we can mobilize joints. So kind of thinking similar to maybe some chiropractic type of treatments, but PTs tend to be a little bit more gentle. We can manipulate the joints, which is more what you think of a standard chiropractic visit if you need. From a nervous system standpoint, we're going to be looking at how is what's going on in life affecting how your body is responding. And so what's going on with your mental and emotional health. We are whole body beings, and those play a huge role in how our body is responding to things. And then we're also looking at the muscles themselves, where you do some more kind of muscle type of treatments, where we're doing massage type techniques, or we're doing strengthening or coordination or treatments to help your body be able to use these muscles appropriately. When you come in for a pelvic floor visit, usually everyone should do what we call an evaluation or an examination visit. And that's where we get kind of your whole history. We're looking at how everything that you've gone through in your life, how it could be contributing. Because oftentimes it's not one big event. It's a lot of micro events that kind of add up over time and then become symptomatic and contribute. Occasionally there's a singular event that causes it, but oftentimes it's a lot of little things. So we're kind of delving in and trying to find what are all these little contributors that might be affecting this. Then we're going to do kind of a whole body screen a little bit. We're going to look at how you breathe. We're going to look at your posture. We're going to be looking at how you move. We're going to be looking at strength within kind of your abdominals, your hips, those types of things. And then if it's appropriate for the majority of my patients, we will do a pelvic floor examination where it's a single gloved finger inserted into the vagina to allow us to put our hands on the pelvic musculature and really be able to assess what's going on there. So we're going to assess tension. We're going to be seeing, is there things that are too tight, or are there things that are like super paper thin and not functioning the way that they need to? We're going to be assessing strength. We're going to be assessing endurance. We're going to be assessing pelvic organs and seeing if those are contributing to any of these issues that you have. Once we're kind of gathering all of this data, I always think of a pelvic floor physical therapist. We're like a detective. We're trying to kind of gather all the clues that are contributing into this one big whole thing. leakage is a symptom, but what's causing it underneath? And that's where the pelvic floor therapist is gathering all these clues to come up with a theory or an idea that we're then going to test by saying, okay, I think things are a little bit too tense and this is contributing here. And the tension is caused by this. And so we're going to give exercises to treat this so that the tension can decrease. And then your leakage is going to be better. We're going to be applying a lot of different strategies based on how your body presents to be able to normalize that function in your body to create this ideal force production, this pressure management, to really get it to where it's like, okay, now everything is functioning the way that it should. And so your symptoms are decreasing.
That's awesome. When I first went to a pelvic floor physical therapist, I walked into the room. I didn't know what to expect. And I looked at the setup and I was like, oh, I'm like taking my clothes off. Okay. I don't know of anyone who's like, yes, I get to go get a pap smear today. Woohoo. It can be like, what? Someone's going to put their finger in my vagina. But can you just put people at ease a little bit? You did say like the one finger, but for you on the end of looking at someone's pelvic floor, women don't need to like do any special care of trimming or, like just put some people at ease, because that can be hard to be like, no.
For us, it's another body part. And we're still sensitive to the fact that it's a private body part that we're not typically walking around showing people like we are our knees or our ankles. But it's still for the physical therapist. We're looking at this as we want to help you. We need to evaluate this in order to treat you. And it's another body part to us. But we're also still very aware of how sensitive this area is for a lot of individuals. And so many physical therapists are going to be trauma informed. So we're going to make sure we're getting permission and that you know exactly what to expect with each stage of the examination. And I'm also sharing what I find with people while we're going through the exam, so that they're understanding that it's like, I'm not just coming up with this stuff on the fly. Like, here is kind of what I'm finding. And then I will often walk them through my thought process. Okay, so this tells me this, and we're going to be looking at this and trying this to see if it makes a difference for you. But yeah, I mean, you don't need to shave your legs. You don't need to prep or shave or apologize for its appearance. It's a body part and it's part of you, and it should be cared for and loved just like any other area of our body.
I love that. And when I recently went to a pelvic floor PT after having my last baby, she was doing the internal exam and she was like, man, like your tailbone has come forward a bit. Like, let's push that back. And it was like mind blowing. It was so cool. I could feel it, and I could feel her like helping get it back to where it was supposed to be so that my tailbone pain wasn't happening as much. And I think it's so awesome that our vulva is a part of our body that often as women we're taught like, don't touch, don't look at, it's dirty. But our vulva and the vagina is like the entrance to our pelvic floor, which needs care. All of our body parts need care and love and to be taken care of. So don't be afraid to take a step. If you have some of these things, whoever treats you is going to be caring. And if they're not, then don't go to them.
Exactly. And that's one of those things where, truthfully, if you're looking for a pelvic floor physical therapist and they don't check intravaginally or intrarectally for your pelvic floor, that would be a red flag for me.
Yeah.
The only times that I don't do one is when the patient is really like, I'm not comfortable with that. And I will say, okay, I can respect that. And we're going to try some other things, but we may get to a point where we can't progress any further until we do that.
Oh, yes. It's so important to know what's going on.
Yeah. Because symptoms are, like I said, the symptoms you're having, urine leakage, it's a sign, but it doesn't tell me exactly what's going on. And I can make things worse if we don't know exactly what's going wrong. It's a huge piece of the puzzle that we really need to be assessing.
With urine leakage, which is so common, one thing you talked about was that our pelvic floor can be too tight, which is so interesting because so many sources talk to women about Kegels to get ready for birth, Kegels to have intercourse be more enjoyable, all of these things. But what are some of the truths about Kegels and when women should actually use them and how they know when they should?
So this is the hard part. And this is where, not to put a pitch in, but oftentimes pelvic floor physical therapy is actually a necessary part, because it's one of those where I'm like, I think it should be part of standard
put the pitch in.
care.
We're here.
Just so that you have a good route and some awareness of like your pelvic floor actually responded to your delivery by going into kind of a guard and tense mode. And it's not relaxing well, and that's contributing to your symptoms. But the same symptoms could also be caused by the fact that your pelvic floor is just traumatized and won't work now. So it can be either end of the spectrum, or it can be like, hey, tension's normal, but it's just not functioning how it should. The treatment that we give you is going to be different based on what is going on in those muscles. So getting a pelvic floor exam, which we won't do until you're at least cleared for intercourse with your physician postpartum. So it's usually 6 to 8 weeks postpartum that we would be doing that. But that's where it's really, really important for us to know what's going on in your body, just because the symptoms don't necessarily tell us what needs to be done. It's not like, oh, you've got urine leakage, like here's A, B, C, D, and E that you can do. Does that mean that maybe you're in a position where you're like, I just can't come see a pelvic floor physical therapist? Does that mean I shouldn't do anything? And I'm going to say no as well, but also being aware of your body's responses and being like, oh, this doesn't really seem to be helping, or things might seem to be getting worse. Then you might need to try something different. I think Kegels have their place, and they're not for every condition, but I don't think we can completely discredit them as well, because sometimes we need to connect with this area of the body a little bit better in order to get these muscles functioning well. But we shouldn't stop there. We do need to move it into more functional activities. And that could look like squats. It could look like core training. It's breaking down the activities that my clients want to do and then training it and adding pressures and direction changes and pelvic floor responses and challenging the bodies in a way that's going to get the pelvic floor to respond in order to get you back to doing the activities that you want.
I feel like that was the biggest shift for me, from hearing about Kegels and kind of knowing what they were to finding a way to integrate them into my normal exercise routines and trying to use them like when I pick up my baby to like make sure and engage my core and pelvic floor and to integrate it to support my body better. And so that was really helpful to go to a pelvic floor physical therapist and have her show me what to do and then tell me some ways that I needed to integrate that into my movement.
Absolutely. I mean, you think of bicep curls. Do we actually do bicep curls in life all that much? Like occasionally picking up a kid, but usually it's more of a bigger movement. You're using more joints. You're not just isolating things that way. So it can be a really good way to help strengthen the pelvic floor and to gain some awareness, but then we've got to train it functionally in order to make a difference.
This has been so awesome, Bree. Thanks so much for joining me. As closing up, can you just share some thoughts about bring it all together? What do you wish women understood about their pelvic floor health? And where would you encourage women who may be realizing they could get answers to their struggles with pelvic floor PT? Like, where would you tell them to start?
Just to reiterate that we don't have to accept dysfunction as normal. Just because it's common does not mean it's normal. Just because you've had a baby doesn't mean you can't get back to doing those activities that you once loved. I can't emphasize that enough. And that there's help. If you are experiencing these things, there's things that you can do. Almost like everything in life that's worthwhile, it does take work. It does take some focus and some consistency, and it's not going to change on its own. You are often going to have to be your own advocate in seeking these out. Our physicians are incredible, but their training did not lead them to say, hey, this is something they can do. Kind of doing strengthening, doing physical therapy is not in their toolbox. So they have to refer out. And oftentimes physicians, we're coming to them for help, and they want to help us with the tools that they have, which is surgery, which is medications. And occasionally they'll talk about lifestyle changes, and occasionally they'll refer you out. But oftentimes we have to be our own advocate of saying, is this something that I could benefit from? Do you know anybody? If you're not happy with some advice that you've gotten from your physician, then you can seek it out for yourself and educate your physician then back, like, hey, this really helped me. You may want to consider this for other people that are coming to you with similar symptoms that way. I'm not trying to throw our physicians under the bus at all. They are incredible and they do what the best they can with the tools that they have. But I'm like, I find that too, sometimes as a physical therapist, like my tools are exercise and manual therapy and things like this. And I want to think that I can fix everybody with the tools that I have. There are some instances where there's some structural damage where my clients need surgery in order to get the results that they're desiring. If you're looking for answers to these, I would honestly, it sounds terrible, but I would Google pelvic floor physical therapy near me. See what comes up. Read the reviews. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Sometimes, maybe even on your social media, hey, I'm struggling with some pelvic floor issues after having my baby. Does anybody have a recommendation for a pelvic floor therapist that you've seen or that you know of? Word of mouth is huge, and you're going to get a lot of great reviews to help you find a provider that is going to best fit your needs in that regard. There's also a few websites where you can look. There's one called pelvicrehab.com, and they have a provider map there that you can look at. And another one is a practitioner map it's called Pelvic PT Rising, and they have a practitioner map there. So these are two websites from some leaders in the pelvic health field. The people that are on these maps have done some extra training and have made the effort to be a part of these practitioner maps. And I think that says something for the providers that are on them. They're specialized in this area. They're really wanting to be a part of the movement, have people find them, and they've got some specialized training as well.
Oh, awesome. Where can people find you if they're interested in working with you, Bree?
I'm based out of Logan, Utah, and my clinic is Luna Physio. And you can find me at lunaphysio.com. So it's LUNAPHYSIO.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Luna Physio Pelvic Health. And we try to educate and help people apply things as they can. We still do have to be a little bit general in the ideas because we don't want to make people worse just from following us and following our recommendations that way. But yeah, you can find me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
I hope that after listening to this episode, you have a better idea of what is normal for your pelvic floor health. I know that I had so many of these misconceptions. I went into marriage thinking that it was normal to have painful intercourse. I went into pregnancy and postpartum thinking that it was normal if my pelvic floor never got back to a place where I wasn't peeing when I was jumping around or doing hard exercises. But the more I've learned, the more I've realized how we have accepted these abnormal challenges as something that's normal after giving birth. And I don't want you to have to experience these challenges and think that they're normal. There is help for you. You can get back to a place of functioning similar to how you were before giving birth to your precious little one. And not that our bodies are going to always be the same. I'm a huge advocate for that. Our bodies change. And honestly, I want my body to change. My body is a testament for the life that I've lived. It shows that I have lived. I don't want to look like my 16-year-old self because I've lived more than 16 years and experienced so much more after high school. I don't want to go back. I want to keep moving forward. And of course, I want to take care of my body and I want to show her love and support and respect. But I don't want to focus on trying to change her to be exactly how she was before I gave birth or before I got married. I want her to find her new normal, but with that, we can have similar functioning in our bodies to what we had prior to giving birth. And I hope that you felt that today as well, listening to Bree. And another quick reminder, if you haven't signed up for my free masterclass, there are only 2 more time slots that I'm doing this live masterclass. You can save your spot by going to ladiestalkinglove.com/masterclass. And if you show up live, I have a free Valentine's printable game for everybody who shows up live. So I have your date night already planned for you. I'm excited to see you there. As always, thanks for talking love. Thank you to all of you who listen and join me on this journey, and to our Ladies Talking Love team who make the podcast possible. Thanks to our sound wizard, Kimberly Demers, and our miscellaneous task whiz, Jana Norman.